in the Daily Maverick. It's an opinion editorial piece. We find out from her exactly what this means for South Africa and how we can learn from the mistakes perhaps that we have made. Good morning, ma'am. Welcome to the program.
Good morning. Thank you so much for inviting us. Thank you.
All right. So what exactly are we saying? What have we learned from the COVID-19 that we've just been through?
Yeah, thank you so much. I think there's hopefully a lot that we're either in the process of learning, or that by the time we're on the other side of the worst of the pandemic, that we will be able to have was accumulated. I mean, I think to start with, one country that has, or several countries in, neighboring us that have learned a lot from, natural disasters, which are in a sense quite similar to this pandemic we're facing, are the countries that were hit by Cyclone Idai, as you might recall. Mozambique being one of them, Zimbabwe being another. And what's interesting to note is that one of the most important mechanisms to provide relief to people across the board were emergency funds, whether it was funds from foreign donors and foreign governments, or domestic funds. And however you look at it, the use of those funds and the transparency around the use of those funds, who they're allocated to, who allocates them, how and when, is vital. And so that's one of the most important lessons certainly countries like Zimbabwe learned in terms of the misplacement of funds, and ultimately having communities that could have been helped faster and better not being helped as they could because of funds along the way being siphoned and put into pockets where they don't belong.
But who are the lessons meant to be for? Are they for the people out there who get the news through papers and media platforms? Because certainly from the government perspective, I would assume that some of these placement of people are deliberate in order to achieve exactly that, the siphoning of those funds.
Yeah, I really like your question, because it does point to the fact that there are many people that should be learning. At the top, and most importantly, of course, are those who are responsible for allocating and the custodians of those funds, right from the National Treasury down to local municipalities who are in charge of ensuring that water is paid for, it's delivered, and that those who shouldn't be benefiting from those funds don't. As you'll have seen in our context, we've seen that councillors have not been doing their job, and in fact have been using their positions of power and authority to benefit in ways that they should, whether it's the form of food parcels or funds meant for communities. And so as citizens, we also are learning. And so I think it's really encouraging. You'll have heard and seen that the Auditor General, for instance, has been reaching out to civil society organizations to say, provide additional eyes on the ground, provide assistance in exposing inappropriate behavior, misuse of funds. And so there's a direct role for us as citizens to play, whether it is in raising the alarm when councillors are doing things they shouldn't be and misusing funds, or people aren't receiving the support and the relief that they should. But the other layer is then ultimately something must then happen. And so when those, there's the prevention side of things, and that's where for us transparency is so important. I think most of us will be aware that if you shine a light on particular processes, the likelihood of essentially darkness in a sense continuing, or poor behavior or misuse continuing is a lot slimmer. And so shining a light means ensuring that we have sight of how much is allocated, so that people know what to expect, and so they know this and this should have been delivered, this amount should have been paid for this, and it hasn't been. Also, knowledge of kind of really basic procurement is quite important as well. So if in a community context we are aware that this and this is not allowed in the context of procurement, and so there shouldn't be a business by a councillor or a municipal official that is involved in either procuring PPE or a range of other services. That allows us to be able to raise the alarm with officials. And I think once there is that system of accountability, and that we all have a culture of transparency, and knowing that we can raise questions when things don't look right and aren't happening. So I think, your question about who should be learning those lessons, it's ourselves as civic actors and as citizens and members of the public. It's our councillors, it's as members of parliament who should be asking those questions. And ultimately, it's actually officials who should know that number one is delivering those services to the people that most deserve them and ensuring that not a cent is wasted. And we're not seeing that at present. And so tracking the funds as we are trying to do and learning lessons about how to track funds meaningfully is really, really important to us.
In terms of civil society and the pressure that they can put against public representatives, do you think enough is being done, or from a united perspective, perhaps a number of organizations coming together to put that kind of pressure? Is it happening, or can more still be done to hold people accountable?
Yeah, I think definitely more can be done. What we've seen and what, the article, the op-ed was about was, the really exciting innovations that people are putting in place, from really basic kind of tracking to more sophisticated ways of doing that. But I think the bottom line is that the fact that so many funds are going missing and being misused is exactly an indicative that not enough is being done. And I think one of the most important factors within that cycle is ensuring that information is available to all that should happen. So there shouldn't be a case in which, as a civic actor, I am more aware of, procurement and misuse than, elected representatives are. That shouldn't be the case. And I think this is one of those times when the cliche that information is power, knowledge is power, is exactly applicable. I think there is definitely space for the state to bring civic actors closer, for the state to be more directly in communication with communities. I think, one of the important questions that's often come up is at the municipal level. If more people were informed and provided the space to give comment and provide insights about what they're seeing, what they're experiencing before the wrong happens, I believe that much more could be done in terms of preventing the loss of resources. But also, I think the notion of building back better. That's another interesting concept, which I think, your questions are important to highlight, is that ultimately it's not just about the immediate context and millions, going, or hundreds of thousands of rands going missing because of COVID-19 corruption. But ultimately, we want to see in 5 years' time, in 10 years' time, in 20 years' time, have our systems developed better, has our procurement system, emergency systems, and the overall public resource management system in the country, has it improved? Have we learned those lessons? Are you and I able to inform, an audit process, for example? That would be an amazing one day to be able to do. Are we having direct contact with councillors and municipal officials and in a way that's meaningful? That means that, collectively, resources don't continue to be wasted, and people who are corrupt don't continue to pilfer, the state purse. I think there's a lot.
Absolutely, and we're going to have to leave it for another day's discussion.
Sure.
Zukiswa, thank you so much for joining us this morning on Salam Media, and we'll continue speaking to you in the future.
Thank you for having us. Thank you. Okay.
Yes, that's Ms. Zukiswa Kota, Program Manager at the Public Service Accountability Monitor.
Breaking stereotypes, moving boundaries, joining hands. Salam Media.
لا تقل لوحدي أو كيف السبيل.
Humanity sets the agenda.
تصنع المستحيل. الحمد لله. Allah loves me, Allah loves you, Allah loves righteous deeds. Left, right or wrong, I've made my choice. صراطا مستقيم. الحمد لله, الحمد لله, الحمد لله. الحمد لله, الحمد لله, الحمد لله, الحمد لله. In times of need, in times of strength, my Lord sets my heart free. I'm at peace when my fellow Muslim is there for me. Alhamdulillah, 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 Alhamdulillah.
An informative Islamic global perspective. This is Al-Ansar News.
Top stories at 9. Eskom has started to implement power cuts this morning. The utility says that stage 1 load shedding has begun and will continue until 4 p.m. And South Korean residents were left stranded as Typhoon Haishin arrived on the shores of its southern peninsula yesterday. A very good morning to you. I'm Nwanda Dima. Eskom has started to implement power cuts this morning. The utility said that stage 1 load shedding would continue until 4 p.m. and after that, it would ramp up the power cuts to stage 2 for the evening peak period. The utility is warning that the frustrating and costly deliberate outages are likely to repeat the same pattern tomorrow and on Wednesday. It is hoping to return some of a generation units to service in the coming days after breakdowns at its aging power plants. It has called on customers to use electricity sparingly and is asking people to share pamphlets with helpful hints on how to prepare before the power cuts. The pamphlet reminds South Africans that they can charge phones in cars and urges them to prepare meals ahead of time. A medical doctor who has been wanted for 2 years for allegedly defrauding the South African Social Security Agency was arrested on Friday. The doctor is expected to appear in the Durban Specialized Commercial Crime Court today. The man was arrested in Durban at the start of the weekend by the Hawks Durban Serious Corruption Investigation Unit. He is alleged to have been responsible for processing fraudulent disability grants in Ngwelezane in northern KwaZulu-Natal. According to Hawks KwaZulu-Natal spokesperson Captain Simpiwe Mhlongo, the doctor was allegedly involved in the defrauding of SASSA between 2005 and 2008. It is alleged that he was responsible for the processing of fraudulent disability grants at Ngwelezane SASSA offices. After the fraudulent applications, SASSA deployed a deputy director, Timikosi Dlamini, who uncovered the files and spoke to the beneficiaries of the fraudulent activities. Dlamini was then shot and killed within 6 days in the office. 6 accused were arrested, convicted, and sentenced for his murder. His death led to a parallel investigation by the Hawks Serious Corruption Investigation Task Team. Meanwhile, Pioneer Foods over the weekend recalled a batch of the 330 ml cans after consumers found small shards of glass inside.